Starship Enterprise isn't just a spaceship, it's the spaceship. Forget flying cars or UFOs, this starship launched an entire cultural movement, taking viewers where no one had gone before. Since the 1960s, the Enterprise has appeared in TV shows, movies, books, and even real NASA projects. It's more than a set. It's a character, a symbol, and for Trekkies everywhere, practically a religion. The behind-the-scenes story of the Enterprise is just as wild as its adventures. From cardboard corridors to NASA borrowing its name, here are 20 weird facts about the Starship Enterprise that prove it's the most famous starship in TV and movie history. The first studio model of the Enterprise, built in 1964 for Star Trek's original pilot, was a 11-foot-long wooden and plastic beast. After the series ended, it didn't get a hero's retirement, it was stuck in storage, gathering dust, and at one point was even considered junk. Luckily, a few dedicated fans and Smithsonian staff intervened, and in 1974, it was donated to the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum. Since then, it's been restored multiple times, including a massive 2016 restoration where specialists repainted it with screen-accurate colors and lighting. Imagine if that thing had been trashed, Trek conventions might have had to worship a photograph instead of the real deal. Today, you can see it proudly displayed in Washington, D.C., proving that sometimes TV props are just as worthy of museum space as lunar landers. When Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry commissioned the Enterprise design, artist Matt Jefferies presented sleek, futuristic sketches. But early drafts looked a lot like 50s sci-fi rockets, with fins, spheres, and even pointy noses. Roddenberry hated it. He insisted the ship look advanced, not like something NASA might launch next week. Jefferies went with a saucer shape, twin nacelles, and a secondary hull, a layout that felt fresh, functional, and iconic. The final look wasn't just cool, it influenced decades of sci-fi design. From Battlestar Galactica to Star Wars, spaceship designers borrowed from Jefferies' nacelles and disc combo. Fun fact, Roddenberry once joked that adding fins would have made the Enterprise look like a hot rod with afterburners. Can you imagine Kirk pulling up in a cosmic Chevy with flames painted on the sides? Yeah, not quite the same vibe. On TV, the Enterprise looked sleek and futuristic, but behind the camera, it was plywood, Christmas lights, and glue guns holding it all together. The original bridge was built from cheap wood and painted to look high-tech, while blinking lights were often holiday decorations rigged to flash randomly. Buttons didn't do anything, they were just glued-on plastic shapes. Even the iconic captain's chair was repurposed furniture with some new panels slapped on. Yet somehow, with the right lighting and music, it felt real. Actors joked that when they first sat at the controls, they felt like kids playing spaceship in the backyard. And maybe that's the secret. Star Trek wasn't about expensive tech, it was about imagination. So tell me, if you were on the Enterprise, would you sit at the helm, the captain's chair, or engineering with Scotty? Drop your answer in the comments and smash that like button if you'd volunteer for the bridge crew. When NASA rolled out its first space shuttle in 1976, fans rallied for it to be named Enterprise instead of Constitution. A massive letter-writing campaign from Trekkies convinced President Gerald Ford to change the name. The shuttle was unveiled with Star Trek's cast and Gene Roddenberry in attendance, cementing the crossover between TV sci-fi and real-world space exploration. The shuttle never went to space, it was just a test vehicle, but it proved how deeply the Enterprise had captured imaginations. Think about it. A fictional ship influenced the naming of an actual NASA spacecraft. That's like the Batmobile inspiring Tesla's next car, or Hogwarts getting a real university campus. The Enterprise wasn't just TV anymore, it was inspiring scientists, astronauts, and engineers to boldly go for real. When the original Star Trek was canceled in 1969, the sets were dismantled, sold, or scrapped. William Shatner, ever the hustler, reportedly tried to buy the bridge of the yacht Enterprise for himself. Unfortunately for him, Paramount didn't want to part it out cheaply. Instead, some pieces went into storage, others were auctioned, and some were simply destroyed. Fans who later bought surviving parts like panels, chairs, or even random blinking lights paid thousands. Today, those scraps are worth fortunes at auction. Shatner later joked he could have bought it all for pocket change back then, but he passed. Imagine walking into Bill Shatner's house and seeing the full Enterprise bridge in his living room. Honestly, it would have made him the king of every sci-fi convention. The original series didn't have computers to lean on, so almost everything the Enterprise did on screen was achieved with ingenious optical work. Those star fields and warp transitions, hand-animated /optical composites layered over model shots. The movie-era warp tunnel that wowed audiences in the motion picture was created with slit scan and multiple passes, not a fancy computer. And the transporter sparkle fans love? That shimmering effect was built from practical particulate elements, think aluminum powder particulates shot against black, that were then optically composited onto the actors. It was all smoke, mirrors, lenses, and patience, and it still looks great because the artists sold the illusion with lighting and timing. Sometimes the most futuristic visuals come from the simplest tricks. From Kirk to Picard to Abrams' reboots, the Enterprise has never looked exactly the same. Matt Jefferies' original 60s design was streamlined for TV cameras. In the movies, designer Andrew Probert gave it glowing nacelles, a sleeker profile, and movie-level polish. The next generation's Enterprise D was bigger, fatter, and more luxurious, like a flying Marriott hotel. Then came Abrams' 2009 Kelvin Timeline version, with a flashier, modernized look that divided fans. Each redesign reflected its era's vision of the future: 1960s optimism, 1980s corporatism, 2000s spectacle. Hardcore fans argue endlessly about which Enterprise is the real one. But let's be honest, whichever bridge you'd beam up to, you'd still be in the coolest ride in sci-fi history. It's one of the most famous quotes associated with the Enterprise, but it never appeared in the original series. Kirk said variations like, "Beam us up, Mr. Scott or Scotty, beam me up," but never the exact phrase.
"Prepare to beam us up, Mr. Scott. Beam us up, Mr. Scott.
Prepare to beam us up."
Fans and pop culture condensed it into the legendary catchphrase. Even Shatner admitted he was shocked when he learned it wasn't in the scripts. Ironically, the Enterprise's transporter was invented mostly because the budget couldn't handle filming. Shuttle landings every week. Teleporting was cheaper, and it became iconic. So next time someone yells, "Beam me up, Scotty," just know it's a Mandela effect moment. It's not in the show, but it might as well be, because the Enterprise made it unforgettable. Every time Scotty shouted about the warp core overloading, he was really standing in the same recycled set. To save money, the Enterprise's engineering room was constantly repainted, relit, and redecorated to look different depending on the episode. Sometimes it was the cargo bay, sometimes sick bay, sometimes even alien corridors. The magic of television meant viewers rarely noticed, but to the actors, it was hilarious. One week they'd be repairing dilithium crystals, the next they'd be fighting Klingons in the exact same room with new props glued on the walls. Would you have noticed, or would you have been too busy listening to Scotty yell about giving her all she's got? Drop your answer in the comments, and hit that like button if you'd happily work engineering shifts with Scotty, recycled set or not. The Enterprise might belong to Kirk, but Spock gave it soul. One of Spock's most famous trademarks, the Vulcan salute, wasn't in the script. Leonard Nimoy invented it. He based it on a Jewish blessing gesture he'd seen in synagogue as a child. When Spock first flashed it on the Enterprise bridge, the gesture stuck instantly. Pair it with the phrase "live long and prosper," and it became one of Star Trek's defining symbols. Nimoy said he suggested it because Vulcans needed something more than dialogue to feel alien yet dignified. The producers agreed, and suddenly, Spock was giving viewers an inside look at Vulcan culture. Funny thing is, many fans didn't realize they couldn't actually separate their fingers like that until they tried. Suddenly, playgrounds everywhere were filled with kids training their hands to live long and prosper. Believe it or not, the Enterprise wasn't always destined to be called the Enterprise. Early drafts of Star Trek scripts listed the ship as the USS Yorktown, named after the famous American aircraft carrier. Gene Roddenberry eventually pushed for Enterprise instead, arguing it had more gravitas and history behind it. The name was already legendary in naval tradition, and Roddenberry wanted the ship to feel like a continuation of that proud lineage. The switch worked. Today, Enterprise is practically synonymous with exploration. Still, imagine if Trek conventions were filled with people in Yorktown shirts shouting, "Make it so." It just doesn't sound the same, does it? Sometimes a single name makes all the difference in turning a starship into an icon. Those futuristic sliding doors on the Enterprise bridge? High-tech in the show, but low-tech on set. Behind the walls, stagehands stood with ropes, pulling the doors open and closed on cue. Sometimes they missed, and the actors had to awkwardly pause until the doors malfunctioned back into place. To sell the illusion, sound effects of a whoosh were added in post-production. Fans thought it was advanced technology, but in reality it was just a couple of tired stagehands waiting for their cue. William Shatner later joked the doors were the most temperamental crew members on set. Honestly, if you look closely at some episodes, you can see the doors wobbling like cardboard because, well, they were cardboard. On TV, the Enterprise seemed like a massive vessel with endless corridors and rooms. In reality, the sets were small, cramped, and constantly reused. Long hallways? That was just one short corridor filmed from multiple angles, with lighting tricks to make it look endless. Engineering and medical bay often shared the same walls with different props. Even the transporter room was tiny. The 6 transport pads were built so close together that actors had to shuffle awkwardly to stand in position. But through clever camera work, music, and editing, the Enterprise always felt much grander. That's the magic of old-school TV. Make something tiny feel enormous. In the imagination of millions of fans, the Enterprise was the size of a city. On set, it was the size of a garage. Sharp-eyed fans noticed that the Enterprise bridge often looked a little different from episode to episode. That's because the lighting gels and color filters changed constantly. Sometimes it was bluish, sometimes more red, sometimes even purple. The reason? Producers experimented to find the most futuristic vibe, and also to keep the sets from looking too dull on black and white TVs. To the crew, it became a running joke that the Enterprise had a mood ring bridge that changed with the captain's stress level. And honestly, doesn't it feel that way sometimes? What about you? Would you prefer a calm blue-lit bridge or a red alert vibe every day? Let us know in the comments and smash that like button if you'd love to walk onto that colorful bridge just once. Before Star Trek had official linguists, it had James Doohan, Scotty himself. Doohan was a master of accents and voices, and when producers needed alien languages for the Enterprise crew to translate, he made them up. He created the guttural sounds for Klingon and some words for Vulcan, laying the groundwork for later expansions. Years later, linguist Marco Cran formalized Klingon into a full language for the movies. But Doohan's influence was the seed. Imagine being the guy who not only fixed the warp core but also invented the language of an empire. Fans later turned Klingon into a real, learnable language, complete with dictionaries and even Shakespeare translations. All thanks to Scotty tinkering with alien gibberish between takes. Whenever the Enterprise cruised through space on TV, it looked like sleek model work. What you didn't see were the wires and rigs holding it in place. The original filming miniatures were suspended on rods, with camera moves creating the illusion of the ship flying. Sometimes the lighting gave away the trick. You could spot reflections or shadows if you looked closely. But audiences didn't care. To them, this was the future of space travel. Effects artists constantly experimented with new techniques, from motion control rigs to different model scales, to keep the Enterprise looking majestic. In a way, those strings and wires were holding up more than a model. They were holding up fans' belief that warp speed was possible. The Enterprise almost never made it to TV screens. The original 1965 pilot, The Cage, was rejected by NBC for being too cerebral. Normally, that would have been the end, but instead, NBC did something rare. They ordered a second pilot. That's where Captain Kirk came in, played by William Shatner. Without that second chance, the Enterprise might never have flown. Even then, ratings were shaky, and the show was canceled after 3 seasons. It was only through syndication and a growing fan movement that the Enterprise became iconic. By the time Star Trek movies rolled around, the Enterprise wasn't just a set. It was a legend. Imagine if NBC had just pulled the plug early. No Trek movies, no Next Generation, no Klingon dictionaries, just one dusty pilot reel sitting in an archive. When Star Trek was canceled in 1969, fans didn't let the Enterprise fade away. They launched letter-writing campaigns, organized conventions, and pressured networks to bring the show back. This fan movement kept the franchise alive long enough for it to get animated series, films, and eventually the Next Generation. Even the Smithsonian restoration of the Enterprise model was fan-driven. Without Trekkies, the Enterprise might have ended up as a trivia footnote instead of a cultural icon. Fans didn't just watch the Enterprise fly, they fought to keep it in the sky. Honestly, the real crew keeping the ship alive wasn't on the bridge, it was in living rooms across America, stuffing envelopes with letters to NBC. For such a beloved ship, the Enterprise sure got destroyed a lot. In Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, Kirk himself ordered it blown up to prevent it from falling into Klingon hands. In Generations, the saucer section of the Enterprise D crash-landed in one of the franchise's most dramatic sequences. Fans cried, cheered, and argued endlessly about whether destroying the Enterprise was a betrayal or a bold move. Behind the scenes, filmmakers admitted they did it partly to shock audiences and to justify building new ships for sequels. Either way, the Enterprise has died more times than some of its crew, but like any good hero, it always comes back, redesigned, rebuilt, and ready to warp again. At the end of the day, the Enterprise is more than plywood sets or filming miniatures. It's a cultural icon. It's appeared in parodies, cartoons, advertisements, and even The Big Bang Theory. NASA named real ships after it. Fans build replicas in their garages. Toy versions have been orbiting kids' bedrooms for decades. The Enterprise is bigger than Star Trek. It's a symbol of exploration, imagination, and hope for the future. You don't need to know a warp nacelle from a deflector dish to recognize its outline. The Enterprise isn't just a starship, it's a promise that we'll keep dreaming of what's out there, and one day, maybe, we'll boldly go too. Conclusion, and there you have it. 20 weird, wild facts about the Starship Enterprise. From nearly being called Yorktown to inspiring NASA, from cardboard doors to glitter warp speed, the Enterprise has seen it all. It's been destroyed, rebuilt, worshipped, and even nearly thrown in the trash, but through it all, it's remained the heart of Star Trek. More than just a ship, it's a symbol of adventure and imagination. So here's the question. Which Enterprise is your Enterprise? Kirk's, Picard's, or maybe the rebooted version? Drop your answer in the comments, hit that like button if you learned something new, and subscribe for more deep dives into the iconic rides of TV and movie history. Live long and prosper.